Okay, so yeah, so this is going to be the final problem that we will discuss, where we will be using dynamic programming algorithm. And well, that's not completely true. We'll come back to dynamic programming when we talk about graph algorithms once again. But for now, we will end our discussion on DP using this fairly non-trivial example, which we'll solve using a DP. Okay, so this will be quite, I mean, I won't say advanced, but it has a very different flavor compared to the ones which we saw over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, so let's get started. Okay, so let's just first define the problem. Okay, so I hope everyone here is familiar with what a binary search tree is. Yeah. So what is a binary search tree? Well, given a set of keys. Okay, so I will assume throughout this lecture, just for simplicity, that the keys are just the first 10 natural numbers. Okay. Um, right. So then what is a binary search tree? Well, it's a binary tree which is designed in a very special way. So it looks something like that. Yeah. So let's say at the root, I have an element X. So this has the property that all the elements that are on the left subtree, the key values are all either less or equal to X. Well, in this case, it's less than X because I'm assuming everything is distinct. And in this, on the right subtree, everything is greater than X. Yeah. And this property holds at every every subtree of this tree. Okay, so that's a binary search tree, and we all know why this is useful, because if we have to do some kind of a lookup on the keys for various kinds of applications, then you can, so this provides a very fast way of doing those lookups and all that. Okay, right. uh, Now, what we have learned so far, so maybe in our data structures course or in some other programming courses, is that in order to be able to reduce search time, so reduce search time, what we should aim towards having is what we call a balanced search tree. Balanced search tree. Okay, and the most common example of a balanced search tree, I'm sure all of you have read about this at some point, are AVL trees. Okay, but there are other kinds of balanced search tree as well. Maybe some of you have heard about them, maybe not. So for example, red black trees are also an example of balanced search trees. Yeah, so red black trees are not as strict as AVL trees in terms of balance, because AVL trees really insist that there is no disbalance at all at any of the internal nodes of your tree. Red black tree relaxes this a bit, but still manages to maintain a runtime of order log n, yeah, or a search time of order log n. So the whole point is that all of these aim towards reaching that sort of the golden benchmark of having order log n search time. Log n search time. Okay, good. So we all know this. I mean, yeah, this is probably the best that we can do. We cannot do better than order log n, because a perfectly balanced tree that will have a height of order log n if you are storing n keys. So this we all know. So what are we doing today? So today the problem that we are trying to solve asks us a slightly different question. So now suppose I give you some more information. Okay, so suppose you know the frequencies of access. Frequencies of access. Okay, so what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, let's say you are trying to build a lookup data structure for an application where you have a fairly good idea of how many times each of the keys are going to be accessed. So you know that one is going to be accessed, let's say 10 times, two is going to be accessed 7 times, and 3 is going to be accessed 15 times, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now you might ask that, okay, why is this a practical setting at all? Well, it turns out it is indeed a practical setting, because suppose you are, I don't know, maybe running some kind of a network routing protocol. So you want to store all kinds of IP addresses. And because your network is sort of static, you know every day which of the, I mean, typically what is the frequency of access of every router and stuff like that. Okay. Also, in sometimes searching through Word documents, this can be a valid assumption that you know the frequencies of access of each of the words of such a document. Okay. So the inherent assumption is that you know this frequency beforehand. For every key between 1 to n, you have an idea of exactly what is going to be the frequency of its access. Okay. So we are going to take an equivalent viewpoint. Instead of frequency, we will say that we know the probability of access. Probability of access. Okay. So probability of access of key I, we will denote it as Pi. Okay, so this is an equivalent thing. So if you think of frequencies, then Pi is nothing but Fi over summation of Fi. Okay, so everyone clear about what the current setting is? Yeah, so it's the same setting. I want to store keys from 1 to n, but now I have this additional information. I have access to the probabilities of access of each of the keys. Yeah. So now the question I ask is, what is the best tree? What is the best tree or best search tree that has minimum average search time? Okay, so what is the average search time? Well, average search time is basically this quantity. So average search time is summation over all I equals to 1 to n Pi times search time of I. Okay, so if a particular key is, let's say, at height 10 in your tree, and the frequency is, let's say, 0.2, then the average access time of this guy is 0.2 times 10. Okay, so you add up all these average values. So if you want to speak in terms of probability, the language of probability, then this is nothing but the expected search time. Okay, so you're multiplying the probability of access of each key with the search time of this node in the search tree that you are building. So the goal is to build a binary search tree which minimizes this average access time. Okay. Now you might ask, what's the big deal? Why can't I just again build a balanced binary search tree? Because that seems to be doing the best. You know, if we didn't have this information, then I should always go for a balanced search tree. That will always give me an access time of order log n. And indeed, if you maintain a balanced binary search tree here, then it should be very clear that the average search time cannot go worse than order log n. Yeah, because I mean, if you think of the very worst case, then all the leaves are at a level of log n, and the total, you know, if you add up the total probabilities of their access, they will add up to 1. So the average access time is going to be order log n, right? But the question is, can we do better, right? So let's see an example where a balanced search tree might not be a good idea under this problem setting. Okay. Yeah, good. So the question is, I give you the frequency of accesses of each of the keys, 1 to n, right? So, and I just denote them using probabilities. They are equivalent. So I want to build a binary search tree which minimizes the average search time, where the average search time is Pi times the search time of I. Okay, summation over all the keys. Yeah, Chintan. Yeah, we will see. Yeah, if it was so easy, then we would not have done this, right? Okay. But let's first see why a balanced search not work. So suppose I give you the following example. So the example is as follows. So suppose I have just 3 keys, right? So suppose I have, so let me copy this example. Yeah. So suppose now this one has a probability of 0.8, this one has a probability of 0.1, and this one has a probability of 0.1. Okay, so that's the setting that we are working with. So now let's see what a balanced binary search tree will look like. Well, clearly a balanced binary search tree will look like the following. Okay, so then you have 2 here, you have 1 here, and you have 3 here. Okay, right? So just to make sure that everyone understands the problem definition, what is going to be the average search time for the balanced tree here? Yeah, this is just to make sure that you understand the definition of average search time. So, okay, I assume that at the root, you have an access time of 1, and then you add an access time of 1 for every level that you are going down. Okay, so if that is the definition of my search time, is the usual search time, right? It's the height or the depth of this node. So what is going to be the average access time if I use this tree? It's going to be 1.9, right? Clearly, because it's going to be 0.8 times 1 plus 0.1 times 2 plus 0.1 times 2, which is clearly going to be something is wrong, right? Right. No, this is. Oh, okay. Yeah, you are right. This is, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, right. So this is going to be 1.9. Yeah. Okay. But is this the best binary search tree that we should do in this setting? Is 1.9 the best average search time? No, right? Okay. Then what is the, yes. Okay, good. So the best binary search tree in this particular example that we can build is actually, surprisingly enough, the skewed binary search tree, which we were always being taught that this is the worst that can happen. This is a chain, right? This is the whole point that we go on to the discussions of balanced tree and all that. This is the canonical example that we take to motivate why we want a balanced tree. But it turns out that in this case, because of this changed problem definition, suddenly this skewed tree becomes the best one. And the reason is very clear. It's very intuitive here, because 1 is being accessed 80% of the time. So clearly I should keep 1 at the top. You know, the rest does not really matter too much in this particular example. Rishi, yes, I will explain 1.9 again. So what I'm doing here is that I am multiplying the probability of access of each of the key with the depth of this node or the search time of this node in this particular tree. Yes, that is the definition of my average search time. So you can think about this as the expected search time. Yep. So what will be the answer in this particular tree? Well, in this particular tree, the answer is going to be 0.8 times 2. Why? Because this has a probability of access of 0.8 and it has a depth of 2. So you do 0.8 times 2. This one has an access of 1. So this is 0.1. And that's why I multiply 1. And this one has an access time of 2, the node 3. So, and then the probability of 0.1. So that's why it adds up to 1.9. Okay. So this was an answer to Rishi's question of why this is 1.9. Okay. So similarly, what is going to be this one? 0.1. So I think if I did things correctly, this is going to be 1.3. Okay. Yeah, there were some discussions about which one is the wrong tree. This is fine, right? Yeah. All right. So is the motivation of the problem clear? So this is clearly a non-trivial problem. We cannot just say that we will use the balanced search tree and get away with our job. That will probably not That might not give us the best answer all the time. Okay. By the way, let me ask you this question. So now what is our goal? Our goal is to search the entire space of all possible binary search trees on n nodes and find the best one in terms of this objective function. But this seems like a humongous task. Okay. So let me just ask you as a general knowledge question, how many binary search trees do you think you can make out of n keys? What are the possible number of binary search trees? Any rough estimate is fine. N, are you sure? Yeah. Okay. So I will give you the answer. Yeah. So I think many people have actually given the answer. So, but I will leave the calculation to you. It's a very interesting thing because you will know how to use. This is a classic example of how recurrence comes into picture if you want to compute something easily. I'm not saying solving the recurrence is very easy, but at least you can write the recurrence and get a feel of in what ballpark this number is going to be. Okay. So the total number of possible BSTs on n nodes is, so this is yeah, this is roughly yeah, let me just keep it at Catalan number. Okay, so there is something called Catalan number. Okay, so if yeah, so but I will encourage you to think about this. Okay, I can give the answer if someone is interested, but you should try to figure it out why this is the Catalan number. But for us, what is important is this is clearly exponential. Okay, so it's a huge search space that we want to look through, and clearly then I cannot afford to brute force search over all possible trees. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, good. So now, of course, we are discussing dynamic programming. So we will be going to dynamic programming. But before that, let's also rule out some of the intuitive ideas that might that you might think about. Okay. So the first intuitive idea is actually you can try to think about a divide and conquer style algorithm. Okay. But what is a natural divide and conquer algorithm here? Well, you can sort all the keys and you can take the median, make it the root, and then just recurse. But the problem is that just becomes your good old balanced search tree, right? So in the example that we saw, this 1, 2, 3 example, if you apply this divide and conquer style algorithm, then it will again give you this balanced tree, which is clearly not going to be the best one. And that's very obvious because here you are not even, I mean, in this divide and conquer thing, which I just spelled out, that's not going to be, I mean, we are not even considering the probabilities. Okay. So now the next natural idea, which Gaurav has already spelled out is, well, I should consider the frequencies into my picture. And then the natural idea would be to make the highest frequency node to be the root of the tree. That's the most natural idea, because ab kya karoge? Whichever has the low, high probability of access, you will want to keep it higher up the tree, right? So that your search time is not large for this particular node. So that should be your idea. And that gives us this natural idea that, okay, why don't I keep the highest frequency node or the highest probability node as the root? And then clearly, so, okay, what I'm trying to say is that I have these nodes. So 1, 2, 3, up to n. So let's say I is, so Pi equal to the max over all I, Pi, okay, or let's say Pj. Right? So this is the max frequency node. So now I can again think of a recursive algorithm. I will make I the root of this tree, and then I will just recurse on the left keys of I and the right keys of I. That's a valid recursive algorithm again. I mean, implementation bhul jao. You can implement this probably using an iterative thing. But inherently, you should think about it as a recursive algorithm. That every time you are choosing the highest frequency node as the root, and you are just dividing your input into the left and right and just recursing. Okay. It turns out that even this algorithm does not work. Okay, but the example is not as easy to find as the previous one. So I will give you the example. It's up to you to convince yourself that this is really the right example. And I just copied it from somewhere. So I will just show you that why this algorithm is also not going to give you the optimal binary search tree. Okay. So here is the thing. So greedy, so suppose this is the setting. So again, I have just 4 nodes. So greedy is not optimal. Okay. So suppose the example is 1, 2, 3, 4, and the probabilities are, okay. So let's say 1 is 0.1, 2 is 0.34, this is 0.33, and this is 0.32. Okay. So this is the example, and I would encourage you to actually figure out what is the optimal in this particular case and what greedy will actually do. Okay. Sorry, this is 0.0. Yeah, this is 0.01. I meant 1%. Yeah. Okay, Chintan, happy now? Okay. So yeah, I'm not going to spell out the trees and all that. That's a nice little exercise for you. So greedy, of course, is very obvious what greedy will do. So greedy will look something like this, right? So it will put 2 at the top because it has the highest frequency. Then it will put 1 here. Then it will take node 3 as the next root on the right subtree because that has the highest frequency among 0.33 and 0.32. And yeah, then it will just put 4 here. Okay, that's what greedy will do. But yeah, but there is a different optimal solution. Okay, so I encourage you to figure that out. Yeah, it will be a nice little exercise. Okay, so now and you might ask that, okay, this is one greedy approach. Okay, but you could do something else. By the way, this problem has a similarity with something you have seen. So can somebody point out this? It should have started to look very similar to something you have studied in data structures. And there also you actually employed a greedy algorithm which worked in that case, surprisingly. Heaps, heaps. Well, heaps is slightly different because heaps may, I mean, okay, but heaps may you do not have this frequency of accesses. So can you remember a problem which you have seen where you know the frequency of accesses of certain things and you are asked to build a binary tree? Very good. It's Huffman coding. So remember, Huffman coding talks about a very similar problem. It's not exactly this problem, because there you are supposed to build a prefix free tree, yeah, which also turns out to be a binary tree or a binary search tree if you want to look at it like that. And the same, and it's a very similar setting because each of the codes were given a frequency of access, and now you have to build an encoding which minimizes the average search time of average encoding time or whatever you may call it. Yeah. But there the setting was slightly different, and there we know that if we do a bottom-up greedy algorithm, so you keep the leaves to be the the highest frequency guys, then that suddenly works there. But it turns out that in this case, even that approach does not work. Okay, so I can keep giving you examples, but that's not going to add up too much. The whole point is that every natural greedy algorithm that you can think about is going to fail in this case. Yeah, people have tried for a long time. So let's hope that they did not miss out on something simple. Okay, okay. So I guess we have enough motivation now to try a slightly more non-trivial algorithm, which happens to be a dynamic programming algorithm. Okay, so let's try to. So any questions so far about the motivation or anything? Okay, so a DP approach. Okay. So now again, we have to start understanding the problem first before we really dive into the solution. So now, what we have been doing. Okay, so Soham is asking for the optimal solution, we want to go into either subtree with roughly the same probability. So Soham, it turns out that that's also sort of a greedy approach. I know what you are trying to say, but yeah, it's unclear how to really formulate that into an algorithm, right? So are you going to, try to do 50-50? Because if you are trying to do 50-50, then it will fail. Because if it's not, because I can always create an example where it's not 50-50, and then the side which is skewed, it will become even more skewed as you go down. So I can always create that kind of example. Exactly. That's the answer. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So what is the main issue? So it turns out that the issue is, and it's really it's almost a trivial observation, but it turns out to be the magical observation which will lead us to an algorithm itself. So the issue is, if I knew the right root for every subtree, then I would be done. Okay. So yeah, here is an apparently trivial sort of a trivial fact that we observe, is that only if some oracle, or some god told me that, hey, this is going to be the root of your tree, then suddenly we actually have a solution to the problem. Why is that? Because I can apply this idea then recursively. Well, I will ask the oracle, okay, now I am at the top level, tell me which one is the root. So the oracle tells you that, okay, node number I is your root. So let's say you make it the root, then you know how to divide. You take 1 to I minus 1 as your left guys, and I plus 1 to n as your right guys. And then you again ask the oracle, hey oracle, what is the root if I want to build a good tree for the keys 1 to I minus 1? And the oracle will again give you a root. So that becomes the root at level 2. Similarly, you can ask for the right side, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, unfortunately, we don't have access to such an oracle, right? Of course, we don't have a magical oracle which, given a set of keys, will suddenly tell me that, hey, you have to make this the root. Okay. But let me ask you, how many possibilities do we need to consider for root? So if I give you n keys, then how many possibilities are there? Well, not many possibilities, right? It's only n possibilities. So it's not that I have to, look for any exponential number of possibilities for a candidate of the root. So there are only n possibilities. And this can probably now start looking as the things which we have been doing. So remember, when we talked about the other problems that we solved using DPs, for example, this ball selection thing on knapsack, we always tried to narrow down the optimal solution to only these few cases, right? Okay, should I take the last item or not? Should I match the last letter with a gap, or should I match it with, the last letter of the other string? There was always these 2 or 3 cases that we need to consider. So here it turns out that, well, the number of cases is not a constant. It's not 1 or 2 or 3, but the number of possibilities for the selection of the root is also not that large. It's only n. Okay. So that's the first observation. So observe that in any optimal solution, there are only n possibilities for the root. Okay, great. Now, again, imagine we are still doing a thought experiment. Suppose this friendly oracle told you that node X is the root of your optimal binary search tree. Okay, I'm just looking at the optimal. I'm just eyeballing the sort of the optimal binary search tree, and I know, due to the access to this oracle, that X is really the root of this optimal binary search tree. And now, of course, you again have these two things. Okay, so let's now start giving some names. So let's say I call this tree T, this tree T1, and this tree T2. Okay, now if you want to design a recurrence relation sort of, or a dynamic programming algorithm, what do you think you should hope for in terms of the trees T1 and T2? What should you hope for? So if T is an optimal solution to your entire set of keys, and X, I tell you that, you know, X is the root of this tree, then what should you hope for about the trees T1 and T2? What property would you like to prove? Good. Okay. Right. Okay. So average frequency is minimum. Well, average frequency is minimum for whom? So I have now, so in the picture, I have like, very good, excellent. Okay. So that's the, yeah. Okay. So that's the whole sort of philosophy of dynamic programming, right? This optimal substructure thing. Okay. So what is our hope? Our hope is that if T is optimal for 1 to up to n, okay, and X is the root, then T1 is opt for 1 to x minus 1, and T2 is opt for x plus 1 up to n. Okay. So remember, I'm not building the trees T1, T2 or anything. I'm not even doing a construction now. I'm just claiming a substructure property of the optimal solution. I'm looking at the optimal solution for the entire set of keys, which is the tree T. And now I know that, let's say I tell you that X is the root, then I'm just looking at the left subtree of X and the right subtree of X. And I'm hoping that T1 is actually going to be the optimal solution for all the keys that are sitting on the left of X, and T2 is going to be the optimal for all the keys that are sitting on the right. This is what I will hope for, because this will sort of give me this optimal substructure property. Why sort of? This is actually the optimal substructure property if this was true. Okay. Now the question is this true or not? And now you can imagine this is not as obvious as some of the problems that we looked at. Yeah, in those cases, it was very obvious that if I remove the last elements, for example, then the rest of the solution should actually form an optimal solution for the remaining input instance. But here it's not that clear, that straightforward. But it turns out that, first of all, this is not a hope. This is actually a claim. Okay. So God is kind, and we actually have this property which will eventually help us design the dynamic programming algorithm. But it turns out that this is the most crucial property. Okay, so let's see why this is true. Yeah, and the proof for this is not as easy as the previous one. So let's just work it out. So we need to do a few lines of algebra, not much, but we need to do that. Okay, so is the statement clear to everyone? What I'm trying to say here? Yeah. Okay. So proof. Okay, good. So again, we will use contradiction. Okay, so suppose this is not true. So suppose not true. Okay, right? So if this is not true, and let us also imagine, so suppose T1 is not optimal for 1 to x minus 1. Okay, so what I'm assuming here that the claim that I'm making is false. Okay, suppose this is false, and just to arrive at a contradiction, I'm assuming that ये जो T1 है, this is not an optimal binary search tree for the keys 1 to x minus 1. Okay, so this is my assumption, and we will see how that leads us to a contradiction. Okay, so if that is not true, then and assume, so let T1 star be another, okay, be the optimal for 1 to x minus 1. Okay, so I'm assuming that, of course, now because I'm assuming that T1 is not the optimal, there has to exist another tree which is optimal for this subset of keys. Yeah, okay. So what I will now do is I will take two trees which are both valid trees for the entire set of keys, and I will show that this new tree that I'm going to build, it actually has a cost which is lesser than the original tree that I started with, which is going to give me a contradiction, right? Because remember that the premise on which this claim is based is that this tree is actually optimal for 1 to n. Okay, good. So what is the other tree that I'm going to build? Well, it's the obvious one, right? So what I will do is I will just cut paste. So I will cut T1 out from this tree T, and I will just paste T1 star here. Okay, so this is what it will look like. So let me just use another color. Okay, so this is T1 star, and this is, let's say this is still T2, and this is X. Okay, right? But note that this is still a valid binary search tree for my entire data set, because I'm not changing the set of keys on the left of X, neither am I changing the set of keys on the right of X. So this is still a valid binary search tree. All I'm doing is, instead of taking this subtree T1, I'm using this magical tree, if it exists at all, on the set of keys 1 to x minus 1. I'm just cutting out T1 and I'm just pasting T1 star in its place. Okay, and let me call this tree T star. Okay, and now I will convince you that if T1 star ka search time is lesser than T1 ka search time, then the search time of T star has to be also less than the search time of T, which is going to lead us to a contradiction. Okay, so why is that? So let's actually compute the search time of one of these trees first. Okay, so what is going to be? So let me call this CT. So CT equal to average search time of T. Okay, so how should I write this? Well, this is, so let's just take it from the beginning. So this is summation of I equals to 1 to n pi times search time of I in T. Okay, that's just the definition. And now I will just break this definition up into two parts. So remember, which tree am I talking about now? I'm talking about this tree T. उसमें जो search time है सबका वो, I'm just writing this out. Yeah, I'm not doing anything fancy. Okay, so this I can write this into three parts. So one is Px, the other is summation, let's say I prime equals to 1 to x minus 1 P I prime times search time of I prime in T plus summation of I double prime equals to x plus 1 to n Pi double prime times search time of I double prime in. Okay, इतना तो सबको समझ में आया होगा, right? This is nothing fancy. I've just written out the definition. I just divided the three things, divided into three parts. Now here is a question. Remember, somehow I have to now go to from the search time in T, I have to go to the search time in T1 and T2. So can somebody tell me what is the relationship for any node which is, let's say, on the left? What is the search time in how can I write the search time of a node in T in terms of the search time in, let's say, T1 in this tree? Okay, so if I take any node other than X, and let's say I'm looking at some node I on the left side, right? So yeah, so what is going to be the search time of this particular node in T, right? If I want to write it in terms of the search time of this node in T1 and something more. Now I'm asking a much simpler question. I'm asking just about one node. So I'm just looking at some node I, which is on the left. Right, so it's going to be just a +1, right? तो यहाँ पे जो इनका सर्च टाइम है वो अगर मान लो कुछ R है तो T में सर्च टाइम कितना होगा? Well, R+1 होगा, because it's just going down by exactly one level, right? Because of the introduction of the root, it's going down by one level, right? So clearly I can write this as equal to Px plus summation of I prime equals to 1 to x minus 1 pi prime search time of I prime in T1 plus 1. This is very, very important. Isn't the frequency addition going to affect the answer? That's an excellent question, and we will see that it doesn't. Okay. Okay. So this is x plus 1 to n. Search time of I double prime in T2 plus 1. Okay. इतना क्लियर हो गया? Okay. Now what I will do is I will do some algebraic झोल. ठीक है? I will just pull out this P1 times 1 वाला जो terms है उसको मैं अलग कर देता हूँ. ठीक है? So this is what? This is equal to Px plus summation over I prime equals to 1 to x minus 1 pi prime plus summation over I double prime equals to x plus 1 to n pi double prime plus cost of T1 plus cost of T2. ठीक है? यहाँ तक क्लियर है सबको? Okay. Now similarly, if I now write the search time of this guy T star, उसमें क्या होगा? Note that everything else remains the same. The only thing that changes. So similarly, cost of T star is going to be this exact quantity. Let me call this, let me give it some name, right? It seems like an important quantity. Let me call this rho. Okay. So this is rho plus CT1 star plus CT2. Okay. And now this brings us to the very nice point which I think Ayushi had raised, that why isn't the frequency when I'm doing this cut pasting business, why is it not affecting the frequency? Well, this is very, very critical, because no matter what you do on your left side, this total summation that we are adding, this is a constant irrespective of what kind of tree you are building on the left or what kind of tree you are building on the right. Because the summation, the summand for that part is just the frequency of all the elements in your original subproblem. And this is very, very crucial for the optimal substructure to work. So Soham has raised a valid question that isn't rho just equal to 1? I will answer this in two different ways. Okay. First of all, it's true that if you take the entire set of keys, then rho is indeed equal to 1. But remember, we will also talk about the sub-problems. In that case, they might not sum up to 1. The other way to answer this is that actually, if you think about it now, we are solving a much more general problem. We don't even need this to be probabilities. You can think of them as any sort of weights that you are attaching to every node, and your search time is just like weight times the search time in the tree, right? So any sort of weights agar aap lete ho, yeah, that will just go through. You don't really need to be probabilities. I just say probabilities in order to motivate the problem. But you can think about any other priorities depending on the application that you are solving. You can attach a priority to every node, and you can say that, well, the average search time is the weighted average search time. So you multiply the weights with the search time and divide by the total weight. That's all you are doing here. Okay. But okay, but is this proof clear? Okay, so now, so this implies that CT star is less than CT. Okay, because I have assumed that CT1 star is less than CT1, and this leads to a contradiction. Okay, and that's the whole proof of the optimal substructure lemma. Okay, so any question? Yeah, I'll just take a pause so that this sinks in to everyone. Yeah, good. No questions? Great. Can you explain the contradiction part again? Yeah, Gaurav, I will do that. Okay, so so is this clear? Like, so I'm starting with this tree T, right? And what I'm doing is that so I'm claiming that ये जो optimal tree है T, if I look at the left subtree, then that is also optimal for the sub instance, which is 1 to x minus 1, and T2 is optimal for the sub instance x plus 1 to n. So if I just leave out x. Now I'm just trying to prove that this is true. So I'm assuming, let's say this is not true. So if this is not true, then there has to be another better tree for the left guys, which is 1 to x minus 1. So you can symmetrically prove this for the right hand side as well. I'm just assuming that, let's say the left side contradicts this statement. So now there is another subtree which is T1 star on the keys 1 to x minus 1, right? So all I'm doing is I am removing this subtree from this guy and I'm replacing it with this green subtree. But this is also a valid optimal binary search tree for your entire set of keys, right? And then what we proved is that if the search time of T1 star is less than the search time of T1, then the search time of T star is also has to be less than the search time of T, which is a contradiction. Because I am assuming that T is the optimal one, right? तो वो अगर optimal है तो इनको भी optimal होना पड़ेगा. मतलब ये अगर optimal है, T अगर optimal है तो T1 को भी optimal होना पड़ेगा. There is no other way that this can happen. Yeah. Oh, I see. So you are. Won't the probabilities get weighted with a constant factor? Why should that happen? So Alok, I don't get your question. Yeah, I mean, we can take it later if you want to rephrase it or something. Okay. We can compute everything in n log n. No, it's not at all clear, right? I mean, we have not yet talked about recurrences or anything. No, it's not so easy, right? Because remember, Gaurav, there are n possibilities of the root. This is just assuming that you know the root. If you know the root, then it's fine. But no, but then you have, it's a huge recurrence, right? How do you do n log n? Let's complete this one. Then we can talk about that. Okay. Good. So now that we have understood this, okay, so ये substructure lemma सबको समझ में आ गया, right? I hope. So now we will go towards an algorithm. Towards an algorithm. Okay. So Gaurav, just to answer your question in one sentence, it's not going to be n log n. It cannot be n log n using this idea, because at every level you have n possibilities. So your recurrence it's like an n-way recurrence, right? So it's no way going to be. In fact, the recurrence is going to be much worse than the Fibonacci thing. So, but we will do that. We will see that we can do it smartly, like in a slightly smarter way. Yeah. Okay. So the question, so again, remember, when I want to build a DP table, I have to first understand what are the sub-problems that I'm trying to solve. So what are the sub-problems? What are the sub-problems? Okay, so let's just try to visualize how the recurrence will actually work if I try to utilize the optimal substructure lemma. Yeah, so I have this entire set of keys, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say x and n. Okay, now first of all, we have realized that at the top level there are n possibilities of the root. So of course we have to consider all those n possibilities, because there is no oracle at our disposal who will tell us that, hey, just make x the root. There is no such possibility. We have to go through all of them. So there are n possibilities. But suppose I fix a possibility. Suppose I'm looking at the possibility that x is the root of this binary search tree. Okay, and then if this is true, that x is indeed the root, I know that then I should just solve the sub-problem on this side, and I should solve the sub-problem on this side. Okay, now let's just focus on the left. Okay, how will you, what do I mean when I say that you need to solve the sub-problem on the left hand side? Well, you will just focus on the, so if I just zoom in onto this left side, how does it look like now? Well, it's the set of keys 1, 2, 3, 4 up to x minus 1. Now again, let's say there is, you have to consider all this 1 to x minus 1 possibilities, and again you fix some root. Okay, so there are all these x minus 1 possibilities for a root for this sub problem, and you fix one, and you just go on, and you keep doing. But the point is, if you fix x prime to be the root, then which are the sub problems that you need to solve now? Well, you need to solve the sub problem which is 1 to x prime minus 1, and which is x prime plus 1 to x minus 1. Okay, so this was your sub problem. So this is level 2. This is level 2, and now this is sub problem level 3, and this is sub problem level 3. Okay, that's how your recurrence is going to work if you want to utilize this optimal substructure property. Okay, now given this, who can tell me how should the subproblems look like? Okay, so remember, we have to take some inspiration from what we have learned so far. Now it turned out that in the problems that we have seen so far, all our subproblems were prefixes of the given problem. Somehow, if you think of the first problem, very first problem that we solved using DP, there were these balls which were arranged on the line, and we just need to consider the prefixes of this entire arrangement. Similarly, when we talked about knapsack, remember, we were always talking about the prefixes of this knapsack. Now, prefixes of this instance, the first I items. When we talked about sequence alignment, we again talked about the first I characters of the first string and the first j characters of the second string. But यहाँ पे क्या होगा? Is it enough to only consider prefixes of the given input as our subproblem instances? So is it enough to consider prefixes? Okay, so somebody says no. And why is not? And if it's no, then what are the subproblems that I should look to solve? Very good, excellent. So one answer is we need to consider both prefixes and suffixes. Okay, so let's see why they're saying this. Well, if I look at the top level, then this is clearly true. Why this is true? Because remember, I have to consider all the possibilities for the root. So all possible values of x, and for each fixed choice of x, I have to solve a prefix. which is 1 to x minus 1, and I have to solve a suffix subproblem, which is x plus 1 to n. But now we have to understand, is even this enough? So is it enough if I say that if I look at the entire sequence of items, which is 1 to n, it's enough to just solve prefixes and suffixes? Excellent. So we need to define a subproblem for every possible sub array of this entire array. Okay? Because remember, if you just look at this level 3, what is the subproblem that you are trying to solve now? Well, you are trying to solve the subproblem where the keys are from x prime to x minus 1. And this is clearly a sub array of your array. This is neither a prefix nor a suffix. But in order to be able to compute 1 to n, first you need to go down. Yeah, Shruti, I will definitely go over this. Okay. Right. So in order to be able to, so let's see, why are we talking about all these prefixes and suffixes again? And this is very, very important to understand. If you get this into your mind, I think you are actually there to, at least, I don't know, the brown belt level of dynamic programming, not if not black. Okay. So, so let's say you are trying to solve this entire problem on the keys 1 to n. Okay. Now remember, I have to write a recurrence. So suppose you fix your x, then of course it's enough to, if I just look at this level, it's enough to solve the subproblems which are 1 to x minus 1 and x plus 1 to n. Okay, at this level this is fine. But suppose now I go down one level of recurrence. So you are solving, so just close your eyes and think about solving 1 to x minus 1. How will you solve this? Again, you will be guessing a root, which is some number between 1 to x minus 1. But now, what are the two subproblems that you are solving? You are solving the subproblems 1 to x prime minus 1 and x prime plus 1 to x minus 1. Okay. Now, if I just look at this particular instance, how does this look like in the context of the whole array that is given to you? This is neither a prefix of this array nor a suffix of this array, right? This is a sub array of this array, x prime to xi minus 1. Because x prime will be some number which is possibly here, and xi minus 1 is here. So in the context of the original problem, this is nothing but a sub array, right? Sub array of 1 to n. Okay? It's a contiguous sub array. Of course, you don't have to skip elements, but it's a contiguous sub array. Okay? Is this clear to everyone? So now my subproblem definitions should consider all possible contiguous subarrays of the given array, which is 1 to n. Okay. So let's just go ahead and try to define. Okay. So the recurrence is p I comma j. Okay. Equal to, so what value will this keep? This will keep the optimal binary okay, yeah, fortunately I don't have to do that. Okay, someone else will do that for you. Optimal binary search tree for keys I plus 1 up to j. Okay. Okay. So this is my subproblem definition, right? So for every possible subarrays of my array, I need to store the optimal binary search tree for this subset of keys. Okay, this is nothing but a subset of keys between I and j. Okay, now let's try to write the recurrence. Okay, there are some caveats. So what is the range of I? Well, so 1 less than equal to I, and this should be less than equal to j. This is less than equal to n. Yeah, it does not make sense if j is smaller than I. Then this subproblem is it's a vacuous subproblem. right? You should just consider those Pij's to be 0. If j is smaller than I, then it's useless, right? Okay. Good. So now if that is the case, then how should I write Pi comma j? Who can tell me? So given this optimal substructure lemma that we had, how should I write the recurrence? Yeah, so I guess it's easier to visualize if I just if you just write down the elements, right? I plus 1, I plus 2, and up till j. Okay. Okay, so let's try to do it slowly, right? So remember, how do I write the recurrence? So remember, I was able to boil down the possibilities of the optimal solution to only a few cases. Okay, not as few as the previous things that we did, not let's say 2 sub cases or 3 sub cases, but I know that if I'm trying to solve the sub problem which has the keys I to j, then the possible ways in which an optimal solution can look like, how many possibilities will be there? Okay, yeah, hello Kevin, I know you've got the answer, but let's just do it step by step. So the first question I'm asking is, very good, it's j minus I plus 1. One possible optimal solution, or one particular case, at least not one possible, one particular case for every choice of root. Yeah. Now, how many choices of root do I have? Well, I can be a root of this tree. I plus 1 can be a root of this subtree. Any of these j minus I plus 1 possibilities I need to consider. Okay. So clearly, let's take an index. Okay. So I will take the minimum of k equal to I to j. Okay. Now, what is going to be what does the recurrence look like? Okay. So again, just visualize that you have fixed some k as the root. So agar aapne k fix kar diya, then what are the elements that are left on your left subtree? Who can tell me? So if I fix some k in this range to be the root of this subtree, then which subproblem should I solve for the left hand side? So according to this definition, it's going to be not 1 to k minus 1. It's I to k minus 1. Very good. So P of I comma k minus 1 plus, and what is the other problem that I should solve? Very good. K plus 1 to j. And what else should I add to this quantity now? Is it only pk? Pk minus pi? Think about it. Okay, let's go to this proof again. What was the quantity that we added? So remember here my T1, exactly, Gaurav, very good. So it's going to be the sum. It's going to be the sum of all the probabilities. And this is very, very crucial, that no matter how you are dividing the problem, you are always adding sort of the same quantity. Okay. Ayushi, no, this is not, there is no minus here. So all you need to do is just look at this expression that I'm currently pointing to, right? So this row thing, right? So what was this row thing? This row is just the probability of all the keys in your original subproblem. Yeah, Soham, I will do that. Very good. So it's good that we are having confusion. So we go over this again and again. Okay. So, okay, so let's do that first because Soham has a slight confusion. So Soham, what is Pij? Pij is, I am just looking at a subset of my keys. Okay. So I have the keys from 1 to n. I am just looking at a subset of them and not just arbitrary subset. It's a contiguous sub-array of this entire array that is given to you, which starts at index I and ends at index j. So Pij is the optimal binary search tree on just this set of keys. between I and j. So in सबका कुछ probabilities है, and think of just building the best subtree possible out of only this set of keys. That is what your Pij is going to store. This is your subproblem definition. Does it make sense? Oh, of course. I mean, so remember, in a DP table, first we always just build the values, and later on we just do this backtracking and build the tree. This is not the tree itself, but the best possible search time for the trees. Okay, that's yeah, I should have mentioned this. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Let me clarify this. So optimal binary tree search time, right? Search time. Okay, good. Thanks. Right. Yeah. My apologies. So I should have mentioned this is really the search time. Okay. So Ayushi, is this clear now that this is not just going to be PK or PK minus anything? This is just going to be the summation over all the PKs. Okay, K equals to I to J. Okay, and everyone else, some other people also probably had this confusion, right? Okay, right? So that's your recurrence now. Okay. Good. Now we are almost there. Okay, but it turns out that there is a slight more detail in this particular thing because of this weird nature of the subproblems. Okay. First of all, what do you think should be the base case here? Can we write? Yes, Kevin, definitely you can do that. Definitely you can do that. Yeah. So Kevin is asking whether I should be able to write summation PK outside the bracket. Yeah, you should be able to do that. Okay, very good, very good. So the question I had asked is that what is going to be the base case, and here the base case is not 0 or 1 or anything, but the base case is very interesting. The base case here is when I is equal to j, because that's what it means to build a tree on just one node. So I comma I, right? This is just going to be, so there is nothing. I mean, what is this subproblem? This is just one node, right? So it's just the frequency of its access times 1. So this is just going to be Pi for all I equals to 1 to up to n. Okay, that's your base case now, right? Okay. So now let me just ask you this question. So of course we have this optimal substructure lemma, and we proved that the optimal substructure lemma is true. Now, if I had asked you to prove the correctness of this recurrence using induction, yes. So remember, this is a recurrence that I have written, and of course I am equipped with this optimal substructure theorem, which is doing all the heavy lifting. But suppose I want you to formally write an induction for this recurrence and prove the correctness of this induction. Yeah, I have the base cases. So what do you think the induction should be on? I mean, I have these two parameters I and j, right? So what I should induct on? Yeah, is the question clear to everyone? So now I have two parameters. Very good. So it's going to be the number of nodes, or in more mathematical term, it's the difference between j minus I. Is the difference, it's the length of the subarray. Very good. Okay. So correctness follows from induction on j minus I. Okay. And now you can imagine that everything just falls into place because the base cases work out. For the base case, j minus I is exactly 0. So that's the base case. And now you assume this to be true for all values of j minus I up to a certain point, let's say k. And you know, if you just look at your subtrees now, then each of this subtree, right, has the value of j minus I to be less than the original problem. So you can apply induction hypothesis. You still need strong induction. So you apply strong induction on both this, And the rest just follows from the optimal substructure thing that we proved. The only thing that you have to realize is you need to do induction on J minus I. Okay, so base case is P0. Let's yeah, okay, okay. Okay, this P and that P is not. So let me write small p. So P0, which is J equals to I. So I know that this is correct. And now, just apply induction. Apply induction plus optimal substructure. Okay, almost done. The only thing that remains now is how to write the code or how to implement this. So I have the recurrence now, and the recurrence looks fairly not very complicated. The only thing that we have to think about is how should I write the code. So of course we will take this two-dimensional array again clearly because I have two parameters. So let's just go ahead and do that. So the algorithm. Yeah, Gaurav, first let's write the algorithm and then we will do complexity. Yeah. Just quickly, let's go over the algorithm. Okay, so let's say P from 1 to n and 1 to n. So this is a 2D array. Okay, now first I just need to fill up the, okay, actually before going into the algorithm, let's just visualize how do I really want to fill up this DP table now. Okay, that's the first question that we should ask, because the for loops will just fall out of them. Okay, so suppose I goes row wise and J goes column wise. Okay, now who can tell me how should we fill up this DP table now? So Soham is saying diagonal wise. Why can't I do it row wise? So what's the problem if I do like the previous lectures, if I do row wise or column wise? Right. So, okay. Yeah. Ananya is saying that, yeah. So then how do you know the base cases? The base cases does not really match. You can think about it like that, but let's just also think about why that does not work. So what I'm saying is that row wise or column wise is not going to work. So suppose we, yeah. So suppose we, yeah, that's true. Difference is same across diagonals. But what I'm saying is that why doesn't filling up row wise work is the question I'm asking. So suppose you have filled up all these rows. Okay. And let's say you have partially filled up this row and you are at a specific position now. Okay. So this is I comma J. Yeah. But the point is, what are the elements that you will require if you want to compute I comma J? Right? Well, it's not enough to only consider the elements that I have shaded. If you think about it, you actually need elements which are kind of here. Yes, you need those elements. So you cannot really fill this table up row wise or column wise. Okay, but that's not an issue because the proof that we did by induction should already tell us how to fill up this table. We need to fill this table diagonal wise. Yeah, if I keep filling one diagonal after the other, then we will have access to all the sub problems that I need in able to be compute Pij. Okay, so right. What is the first thing that is going to be filled up? Well, it's going to be the main diagonal, right, which is I equals to J, and then you are just going to fill up, for increasing values of J minus I. Okay. So I guess so I think it's going to go this way, right? Yeah, that's the way in which you're going to fill up. Yeah. Okay. Now, how do I implement this thing? How do I implement this using two for loops? So I understand that I need to fill it diagonal wise. Yeah, Harsh. So the middle one is I equal to J. This is I equal to J. this is j minus I equals to 1, and so on and so forth, right? Or is it going to be the other way? No, this is fine, right? Oh, so is it going to be the, oh, so it's going to be downward? Is that correct? I need 1 comma n at the end, right? Oh, I see. Okay, my mistake. My bad. Yeah. Okay. Good. So yeah, sorry. I should fill this one. Yes, absolutely correct. So this is going to be the base case, right? Okay. And now I should go towards what? Northeast, right? Northeast or southwest? Northeast. Should be northeast, right? Yeah. Northeast. Yeah. So I'm going to fill up this way. That's absolutely correct. Yeah. Sorry, my bad. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So how am I going to implement this using using for loops? How do I fill up diagonal wise using 2 for loops? Yeah. So okay. So let's just write the base case first. So for I equals to 1 to n, p I is equal to pi. Okay. And now I just simply, because what is the invariant for a diagonal? The invariant is precisely this j minus I thing. Yeah. So it's 0 for this guy, 1 for this guy, 2 for this guy. So I will just run an outer loop which will track the difference of j and I. Yeah. Yeah, Ananya, it's so what do you mean identical? You need some, because southwest is like I is bigger than j, right? So then you have to do like the other direction. So the reason we are doing northeast is because I always has to be less than j, less than or equal to j. It can never be more than j by the definition of our subproblem, right? But yeah, the idea is going to be the same. Okay. Yeah, but for this DP you cannot do that. I mean, this part is redundant. I mean, you should not even fill this part. Yeah. So for s equal to, let's say, 1 to n minus 1, and for, I don't know, I equals to, so please correct me if I'm wrong, I equals to 1 to n, yeah, so just pi comma I plus s is, yeah, so this is just the recurrence. So I'm not writing this, and eventually you have to return 1 comma n. Okay, good. So everyone clear about the algorithm? क्या हो रहा है यहाँ पे? Right? Okay. So what is going to be the running time? So I think Gaurav has already jumped guns a bit and he has written n cube. So let's see why this is n cubed in the worst case. So the reason it's n cubed is, well, I'm filling up n square many entries roughly. So it's not exactly n square, it's n square over 2, because remember, I'm only filling up starting from the main diagonal and going towards the northeast. So I'm just filling up half of this matrix, but that's still order n square. It's like roughly half of n square, right? Now think of what you need to do for each of the elements. Yeah. So for each entry, you actually need to take the minimum over the size of this subarray. So if I'm just trying to fill up I comma j, then I just need to go over all the possibilities, all the j minus I plus 1 possibilities for just computing one entry of this table. So there are n square entries. So runtime is n square entries, and I comma jth entry takes roughly j minus I plus 1 operations. Okay, all these are approximations. As you can imagine, there will be constant factors, but that's okay, right? And now, well, you can ask that, okay, how do I, why should I just upper bound this by n? I mean, j minus I are sometimes it's very small. For example, when you are close to the main diagonal, then j minus I plus 1 is actually a constant. So it's true indeed that for some of the diagonals, this is going to be constant times the number of elements on the diagonal. But you can imagine as you go towards the end, then at least half of the diagonals this difference is going to be quite large. It's going to be roughly order n, right? N over 4 or something like that. So you indeed need to consider like order n possibilities for computing each of the entries. Yeah. So this gives us theta of n cube. Yes. So this is not a super attractive algorithm in that sense, because what do you think you can compute? What values of n? I don't know. So you are experts in programming. What values of n do you think you can manage with an n cubed algorithm? Yeah, 1000 ho jayega. Okay. Yeah, in my time, it was only up to 50 or 60. But now, yeah, I think 400, 500 should be fine. Okay. But before we conclude, let me give you some more encouraging fact. So a couple of people, so Knuth in the 70s and Yao, I think in the 80s. So these are all stalwarts of computer science and algorithms. So they actually designed a theta n square algorithm for opt BST. Okay, so theta n square is really the best possible. Yeah, and of course it needs some more ideas on top of what we discussed today. No, Gaurav, I'm not saying the runtime is n square. It's a different algorithm. No. It's definitely a different algorithm. Not this naive divide and not this naive dynamic program. Right. So the approach basically is that you can reuse some of the computation. Yes. So basically, the point is that you don't really need to consider all the possibilities for each level of recursion. So what they realized is that if you fix a particular route, then not all the possibilities can happen deeper down the tree and so on and so forth. Yeah, and this is a very special property of this particular problem. Now we have to really go deeper into this frequency business and stuff like that. Okay, so I mean, at a very 30,000 level view is that you are piggybacking on some of the calculations that you have done on the top level. Okay, but they are entire research papers, so it's impossible for me to say this in like one sentence. Yeah, if you're interested, I can point you to the paper. Yeah, but that's a bit advanced. Yeah, I don't think it appears on any textbooks. Okay, so we stop here today, and I'm happy to take questions.